One of the things that I suspect, and based now on this past weekend, our openings, this weekend was the first time we were able to have a full unrestricted audience size. And my impression from being in those audiences was that there were a lot more like younger audience members. There was a lot more. Yeah, it looked a little different than our typical audience. And I think that there's a direct connection between that and having all of this streaming content.
It's so lovely to talk to you finally.
Yeah. Likewise. Yeah.
Daniel, tell me, where are you now at the moment?
I'm actually in Florida right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm in. This is starting my fourth season with the Florida Orchestra as resident conductor. We just started our season this past weekend.
Amazing.
Beautiful Beethoven Fifth Symphony and a really great rendition of the Four Seasons, Vivaldi Four Seasons, by our concertmaster Jeffrey Multer, and a brand new piece that was commissioned by the orchestra by an American composer named Michael Ippolito. And that was a really interesting piece. Used brass in the balcony kind of surrounding the audience, and it was based on a sonnet from Petrarch that was composed during the Black Plague back in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, so how fitting actually for this time.
Yeah, it was very, very I think managed to capture the mood. It's not a huge piece, but it really distinctly captured the mood. And also reminds us and that this is part of life on this planet, that we faced this kind of situation in the past and somehow managed to persevere. So I think that was a really nice message to get our season started.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think in this time we also reflected and also looked at the past and the similar sort of pandemics and things that happened. And we saw how people managed those years. And now we are also facing things that we thought was only part of history,
Yeah, exactly. It happens just like far enough apart that we kind of forget that it happened.
Yeah, exactly. This the orchestra, is this now the first time you've been able to do concerts since the lockdowns and so on, or have you been doing things already before?
Well, we were one of the most active orchestras in the United States over the past year, and actually I think we might have done more live performances than any other other orchestra in the U.S. We did more than 80 live concerts last season. And we were able to do that because the orchestra put together a very quick response of finding a way to set up on the stage so that we're properly spaced apart, and we had a very strict testing program for the orchestra. We were testing about 3 times a week, and we also limited the audience size to just about 25% of our audience capacity. We had much better, the hall we were in upgraded their air circulation system and things like that. I'm not exactly sure all the things they did, but they worked on that very hard. And so yeah, we were very, very active. And in addition to the live concerts, we also did streaming concerts. Some of them were archived on our website, so you can actually go to our orchestra website and view some of these concerts from last year.
Wonderful.
So yeah, so our orchestra, I mean, we did have a pause of about 8 months. We lost a lot of concerts at the end of 2020. and then we had our normal season. We have a 4-month break in the summertime anyway. So we had that break and then delayed the start of our season so that we could put all these things together. But, I think that we were all really inspired and able that we were just able to make music at all, and when the pandemic started, we just weren't sure when was the next time we would see each other.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you now if you think the musicians were much more sort of eager to get going and do it and find solutions to get to play again.
Yeah, I think we started off the pandemic with everyone just kind of. I felt there was a lot of unity and purpose. We were all trying to find solutions to the problem. So we started out and we got going really quickly after the lockdowns began. So some of our musicians were recording themselves making like teaching videos. Some of them were just recording solo pieces that they were playing, and I had the very grandiose, ambitious idea of putting together one of these collaborative virtual videos.
Oh, yeah.
So that was my contribution, but I just had this one problem, which is I had no idea how to do it. So there was kind of a learning curve, but we managed to I managed to get the orchestra to record individual parts for a number of different pieces and then put it together. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time to do that. Great respect for all the professional videographers and recording technicians out there. Well, and another thing that I had a great appreciation for when I started this is, in classical music in the orchestra world, we tend to be a little more conservative and we're focused really on live performances. But this pandemic forced us to really think about technology and so I was researching, watching videos and just trying to figure out how to do this, what software I would need to use, how to use the software. And as I was doing this, I realized that this technology was it's all out there and it's been used by like popular music for decades, so it was like this catch up, like, oh my gosh, we can do this too,
Yeah. But actually, there was a masterclass where they actually had a section of this teaching sound, because they exactly what you're saying now, that they realize it's also important for musicians now to understand this aspect, of this technology, basically.
Yeah, it's and it just kind of like, sometimes when you have a crisis, it just forces you to think in a different way and to act in a different way. And I think that prompted a lot of innovation on everyone's part. And on top of that, there's this great feeling of we all want to do our part. We all want to find a way to continue making art, which is really special. And I think that the one of the things that I found very, very moving at the beginning of the lockdown was the first time that I sent this, I sent email out and I asked everyone to record themselves with whatever technology they had available to them and then send it back to me. And at this point, I hadn't seen my colleagues in like a month or a month and a half. I'd just been at home in the apartment the entire time. And suddenly I had these videos of them, but videos of them playing in their own living room, like in their own space. And it was this just amazing, like sort of intimate connection, even though it was recording that they had made, even though, we weren't really in the same room or anything, or even talking. It was a very special feeling. And the fact that we were able to create these recordings and have them, the orchestra playing together, even though we obviously were not playing together. I think it's a very emotional moment. Well, and the orchestra is a large group of people, and so you're used to sort of thinking in terms of this group, this large dynamic, and to see it like to really like pared
Yeah.
down to just one voice at a time. And I was the only one who got to experience that because I was the one who was putting it all together. So I felt like it was this kind of special moment for us all.
This is amazing what you're saying. Yeah, this is, I can totally get that. Do you also think that sort of the boundaries have been shifted? You know, that in especially for classical musicians, that they, I think if you think previously, for example, if you had asked your musicians to do that, would they have done that? But because of this pandemic, sort of people did things that they normally wouldn't have. The rules were broken a little bit. That gave a bit of freedom also for some musicians.
I think so. And I think especially, you know, the classical musicians, I think, are very focused on the live concert experience. And that's always been the case. You know, even though we've made CDs in the past, they've made records, they've made, you know, broadcasts on TV, but I think everyone is really focused on that live concert experience. And so, you know, there was, I think before the pandemic, there was always this reluctance to like, you know, if we start making our concerts available online, for example, will we get people to come to the concert hall? You know, will people actually come there? And there's this sort of fear about that. You know, so it sort of took a situation where we had no choice. Like you either do this online or you don't do anything at all, and that kind of changes how people think. But one of the things that I suspect, and based now on this past weekend, our openings, you know, this weekend was the first time we were able to have a full unrestricted audience size. And my impression from being in those audiences was that there were a lot more like younger audience members. There was a lot more. Yeah, it looked a little different than our typical audience. And I think that there's a direct connection between that and having all of this streaming content, because that's the way that younger generations, younger people are used to interacting with things, especially things that they're not super familiar with. You know, if they're just trying something out, that's what they want to do.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you there. I did a whole series where I talked to musicians during lockdown. And this was the question that I asked, is it not a good idea? Because some would say it's not a good idea to just put content out there, you know, like on Facebook and Instagram. And some said that they felt they needed it, you know, they needed to play and they needed to have this purpose of thinking, well, I'm doing something to put out there. But I think the way social media also works, even if it's not, and the streaming, you know, every time somebody's shared a link or shared something of music of musicians, you never know where it goes, you know. So I totally agree with you. I think it was in that way, it reached a different audience than would normally.
Yeah, and I think a couple to expand on that a little bit. You know, in other ways, you know, if you think about sports, for example, you know, everyone can watch sports on the TV or listen on the radio or whatever, but people still want to go see the game live because they understand that however fun it is to watch this on TV, it's even better to be there in the stadium. It's more exciting. And I think that, and people think about that with pop musicians too, you know, like these rock concerts have huge crowds. And you know, even if you've heard, for example, Lady Gaga a million times on the radio, you know, if you're a Lady Gaga fan, you really want to go see her in person. So I think the same dynamic applies for us, and we have to sort of like embrace that, because if you see a recording of an orchestra on the internet, on streaming, that just gives you the hunger to see it in person so much better when you're actually in the concert hall.
Yeah. No, Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I thought also, I mean, there were a lot of talk about, well, it's getting out for free, people seeing it, looking at it for free, and I think in a way it has a longer term uh, come, or how do you say, the advantages of it would be long term, in the sense that that brings then the audiences again back to the concert halls. But it's very interesting that you say this about the younger audience, because this was also a question that I used to ask everybody is, do you think that audiences will be hungry to come back, or do you think newer audience will come? And most musicians believe that. They believe that the audiences would come back. And some said no, they don't think so. But I would say the majority thought that audiences would come back. And it's now this, it's great that you say that, because this is evidence now that that it is true, that it is working.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest issues that, like for many years, orchestras have been worried about getting younger audiences to the concert hall, right? Or people that are not used to watching or listening to classical music or going to classical concerts. And it's this age-old problem we've had. And I think, at least in the United States, one of the biggest issues of getting new people to the audience is that there are so many conventions of etiquette. There's so much tradition of how you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to act.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to clap in between movements and all these things. And so if you're if you don't know anything about these traditions and you come into the concert hall, and then you have people who've been there for a long time telling you to shut up and all this, it can be a very unpleasant experience, or at least not it can take away from the enjoyment of the music at the least. And so I think that in some ways a live streamed concert is the best way for someone to experience classical music for the first time, because they don't have to worry. What's more comfortable than your own living room?
Exactly. Yeah.
You don't have to worry about this. You can start to learn a little bit about the music. You can really focus on the music itself and not all of these social conventions. And then, if you like it and you enjoy what you're seeing, as we all assume that you will, then come to the concert hall and you've already got a better idea of what the experience will be like before you even get there. So that's also a very maybe underrated potential for this kind of performance.
Yeah, and I think it's also, well, because I'm not in the music industry or have any music education, and I'm also not, like a regular diehard concert goer. For me, connecting with the musicians while I was taking their pictures in the window, and they started talking about the music and the art and the instruments, it made me so interested in what they were doing. And I think it was this communication also, and this is what I'm also asking a lot about to artists, and isn't it more important also to communicate the music, not just talk about the specific music, this specific piece. I'm not talking about being how can I say, it's like this connection that I feel that there has to be between the audience and the musicians, that they understand what is being played, or that not everybody is educated in music, but and if something sounds a little bit different, then of course when you explain a little bit about it, then it makes it more interesting, and if you know the story behind it also, even if you don't know the music, but you understand where this comes from, then it makes it also more interesting to listen to the music,
Yeah, so I think that with the biggest challenge for that is instrumental music. Whether it's orchestra or string quartet or anything, because when you have if you have a singer, if you have words, then it's very easy for the audience to grasp what that music is all about, because you have the words to guide your interpretation or your thoughts. But when you have a long instrumental symphony, then it's not always, like you said, if you're not used to it, if you don't have experience, if you don't know much about the composer, you need, the audience needs some way of relating to what they're hearing. And so, I think it's very important to kind of give that connection. And I think the more that musicians can do that, without there's always a balance, because you don't want to have like a 30-minute lecture about this thing, before you get to playing, because then everybody's like, oh, okay, can we listen? But I think it's possible to just give a few little things that just gives the audience something to listen for. And I think that it's important for us as performers to invite the audience into our world. In previous generations, that was not the way people thought. There was much more of like there's the stage and the performers, and here are we, the audience, and we don't cross that line, and we just sort of admire what they're doing. That was much more accepted as in previous generations. But I think for us now, when we're used to having so much access, with Twitter, with everyone taking videos and photos, and the incredible amount of communication available, that's we need to also give them access to us. We need to show them who we are as performers, what it's like preparing and presenting these concerts. And I think people love that.
Yeah, no, definitely. But tell me now, do you have also from your orchestra outreach programs and things like that? How do you reach younger audiences, or how do you reach younger children to have also an interest in playing instruments?
Yeah, so we do a number of different things for that. And a lot of those are concerts that I am personally, responsible for. So we do a youth concert where we, in a normal times, we would invite, the grade school children to come to our concert hall, and we have a special program it's shorter, and we make sure to explain a little bit about what each piece is going on. And we usually invite some dancers to join us for one or two of the pieces. We invite singers so they can kind of see all the different ways that you can make music. And we also invite the kids to participate a little bit, either by moving or by singing along.
Oh, okay,
because I think, participating is the best way to get engaged. Unfortunately, because of pandemic, we can't invite, they're too young to be vaccinated still. So we decided to do that as a video concert this season. But we'll still be able to send it to their classrooms, or they can view it from home. So that's one of our main forms of reaching out. But we also have a really strong teaching program as well. We have a number of musicians on our roster who are playing in the orchestra part-time, and then also teaching in the local schools. And basically they're helping out the music teachers to develop strings programs and to get students started on instruments where maybe those students wouldn't have the resources just with their own family, or wouldn't have a way to access that. So that's been a really successful program, and I think a great way. There's no better way to get to know and love classical music than learning how to play an instrument.
Exactly, yeah. And this is what I'm was talking also about, is the education. And I know in America there are different levels of interest in music or in art, because different counties or have different educational programs for art, for example. So how is it in Florida? Is it are there enough to do at schools? Are there the school system, do they provide enough art education?
Well, I think it really depends on the school. Every I think that's the one thing you could say about the United States in general, is that
Mhm.
it's very uneven, you know. So
Yeah.
there are some really excellent schools and really excellent teachers, and there are some schools that are, you know, they don't have the funding, they don't have the resources
Mhm.
to have a strong program. And so, which is one of the reasons why we're doing this
Yeah.
program, is to help out the places that don't have as many resources. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that it could always be better, you know.
Yeah.
Like for me personally, I think I wish that our society valued more
Mhm.
the teaching, well, teaching in general, but also especially learning how to play an instrument, learning how to do art, learning how to, you know,
Yeah.
or be drama or acting, you know. All of these things are part of the human experience. And I think for some students, this is the way that they approach everything else that they
Mhm.
learn, you know. In our society, we have a tendency to just like focus on some specific skills that we want to be at a certain level. And so like if they can't, students can't do math or can't read at a certain level, then they should just make them do more math and more reading until they get it,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know. And I think actually the solution for a lot of those students is that they need to have band, they need to have orchestra, they need to have art class, you know. This is how they engage with school. And if they have that, if school becomes a more fulfilling experience for them, then their other scores will also improve as well. So
Exactly. Yeah.
that's my personal
Well,
opinion.
I totally agree, and I think, you know, there's so much focus on the maths and the science, and well, even when I was a child, you know, I wasn't very good in maths and science, but they were not very much something else you can do. You know, you were sort of, I think you are if you're not good in maths and science, you're not seen as intelligent in a school. You know, it's all those and I think there are children who can express themselves in many other ways, and the opportunities are not always there. So my wish is really that the education system would change to having art subjects alongside maths and science, so that, because they are so interlinked anyway, you know, that they are available for all children, that all children can have the possibility to learn some form of art. Not, they don't have to become the musician or the, you know, the dancer, but that they have the opportunity to at least express themselves or have that development
Yeah, and
possibility, you know. So yeah.
it's part of being a complete person, you know. I think
Yeah.
that there's a great story. I don't remember who this is about, but it's about a dancer. Since you mentioned
Yeah.
your children are doing ballet, of a famous dancer who, as a child, was just kind of hyperactive and just like,
Mhm.
you know, couldn't concentrate and was doing badly in school. And their parents were just like, didn't know what to do with this girl. And then they took her to a dance class, and she just like suddenly, this is where what she was meant to do. And that, I think, and ended up being a famous dancer, ballet dancer, famous choreographer. And, you know, when you're judging, you know, people just have different skills, they have
Yeah.
different talents, they have different ways of approaching the world. And if you're trying to do everything exactly the same way for everyone, then a lot of people are not going to be able to fulfill their full potential.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Listen, I want to ask you now something on a very lighter note. So, before a concert, how do you prepare? Do you have some sort of ritual?
Well, you mean right before a concert
Yeah.
or
Yeah. So, the day of the concert.
the day of the concert? I usually try to do a mental, like go through the entire concert mentally,
Mm.
um, including if I'm going to say a few words about the music or, you know,
Yeah.
anything like that. I just kind of think about that all. I make sure I get enough sleep, that I'm well rested, um, and try not to eat too like heavy food or
Oh,
anything.
yeah.
You know? I want to have as much energy as possible. Um, and then I just kind of I do a little bit of meditation, kind of along the lines of just thinking about what a wonderful thing that this is going to be, what wonderful music, how lucky it is that we get to do this. Because I think that it's really important, especially for a conductor, to bring the right energy to a performance.
Yeah.
And one of our main jobs is that, you know, it's human nature to pick up on, absorb the energy of those around you, and especially if you have someone that's kind of in a position of authority or leadership, the energy that they bring reflects on everyone else. And so I want to make sure that above all, that I'm bringing the right kind of positivity, the right kind of expression and artistic content, so that the orchestra feels at ease. They feel relaxed, they feel concentrated and ready to go. So it's not, I don't know if I have like, I don't have like a schedule that I follow or anything about this.
Just,
just I always think about, like, you know, I want to be as confident and as connected to everyone as I possibly can.
And then do you have a specific outfit? I have to ask that. I'm a girl.
Well, I'm a man, so my options are kind of limited. But I do have a couple of different tuxedos. I have, the traditional tails, like frock coat. I have a more normal black shirt, black jacket. I have a white jacket. I don't get to use very often. It's usually in the summertime. I also like to wear like sort of an all black sometimes. And then I can change, different, like all black, but with a very shiny tie of some kind.
Oh, okay. Oh, I like that. Bit of
color there, So it's it's not a lot of variety, but it's
but do you feel you don't feel restricted by jackets? Because that's what the conductors sometimes say, that they feel they have to be comfortable.
Yeah, and I have had so like the tuxedo jackets that I've had custom made or in some case, or adjusted at least, so that I have really good motion. Because if you just buy a jacket from the store and then don't change it, it's usually not designed for you to be doing all this stuff with your arms. So it's important to feel like free with your physical motions.
And then now, after the concert, are you a beer man or a wine man?
Well, I have a great appreciation of both. But I tend to get beers after the concert.
Really, a lot of conductors do drink beer after.
I think that well, first of all, there's a lot of great breweries in the United States. So it's really easy to go somewhere and get really nice beer. But secondly, it's a little more refreshing. I think it's a little more, you're just spend a lot of energy, and it's, I love a glass of wine with dinner, or, when I'm feeling a little more like contemplative, or feeling more relaxed at home. But when I want to like go out and celebrate, then I definitely want a beer.
Well, I think the brewery should change this whole image of this sportsman, or this guy, drinking. They should get the conductors, because you won't believe how many conductors are beer men. They just have a beer afterwards. So I think that's the way to go to for marketing beer now. Yeah. And what is now next for you? What is the next in autumn happening?
Well, I've got a few concerts coming up. I actually, the most busy part of the year for me is between January and April.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm kind of like slowly increasing my number of concerts I'm doing. But I also have been working, composing a lot of music.
Oh,
And
okay.
so one of the things that I'm working on now, I composed during the pandemic a song cycle based on the poetry of Pablo Neruda,
Yeah.
the Chilean poet, which I'm very, very pleased with how that's turned out. And it took a long time for me to get the rights to set the text, because you need the permission from the Pablo Neruda Foundation estate. So I'm now thinking about, in addition to preparing for these concerts coming up, I'm thinking about how I can get these pieces performed and published. There's a couple of singers that have expressed interest in doing performances of them. So, but the pandemic is making things more difficult. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I
Well,
have.
this is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
What
for
is it
example,
about this? What is it about these poems that you wanted to compose something about for that?
so the poems that I chose are from a volume that he wrote called 100 Love Sonnets.
Okay.
And he wrote this poetry for his lover, who eventually became, I think, his third wife, named Matilda. And they're extraordinarily beautiful poems.
Really?
Extraordinarily variety. It's 100 love poems, but there's such a variety of different feelings within them and images within them. So I found these very, very inspiring. I sort of came across this book of poetry by chance right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Really?
And so I read them all, and I picked 6 that I thought had sort of a universal voice. That, I immediately was thinking about composing. And so I wanted to have a soprano singing, but some of the poems by Neruda have a very masculine perspective, very masculine point of view. So I thought I wanted to find poems that could be either way, that was more universal. But in a larger sense, I also, without at that time not knowing how long it would be till we would be able to do concerts again, I just had this desire to do something that was beautiful, to and not based on the pandemic, not based on lockdowns, but just something that would remind us of the beauty that exists in the world. So that was, and because there was so much shut down, I was actually, I don't often have the time to compose except in the summertime with the busy conducting schedule. But I had the time, and so I did it. And I was fortunate to be connected with a soprano who I've worked with in the past named Laura Pisani. She's based in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And she's a big Pablo Neruda fan, so she wanted to record them, a demo of them. And this was another pandemic project, because in Argentina, their lockdown was so strict, she could not even meet with a pianist. So we came up with a solution where I got a friends and colleagues pianist. I'm not a pianist, unfortunately, so I couldn't record it myself. But I've got friends who in the United States who could record the accompaniment and then sent the accompaniment to her, and she recorded herself.
Amazing.
In her living room with her iPhone or whatever, and I was able to put these two together. So this is the recording that we sent to the foundation in order to get permission. And it's not really a commercial recording, but I think it's a good demonstration of the piece.
This is amazing. Listen, I'm in love with love, so I want to talk to you. We have to talk a separate interview about this when you do this and I don't know what the next step will be, but I would so love to do that, to hear more, that when will you have this permission, or that you will record this?
Well, the permission is all taken care of now.
Yeah.
So the only thing that's remaining is, so I'm trying to get a performance in Argentina with the same singer, but the pandemic has just made everything complicated down there. So I'm hoping at some point this season that she'll be able to do it, but we're not exactly sure when that will be possible. And then I'm working with another singer in the US who we've talked about maybe doing some kind of a CD project, or maybe some kind of performance, but that's probably not going to happen until in the springtime or maybe early next season. Unfortunately, a lot of the places that this could be presented, they've already scheduled their season for this year. And because I was waiting for the permission, like you can't just perform this, so I couldn't just schedule a performance, because if I didn't get the permission to use it, I couldn't. So
this sounds amazing. Yeah, I think it will happen for you, definitely, because it's about love. It's about love. It will.
Yeah, and the text of Pablo Neruda is just such beautiful. I mean, everyone who has encountered these poems, I think, has been very moved by them, and I also feel that they're particularly good for music. Like that's the first thing I thought, is that these poems are just made to be set to music. They were very, very inspiring. I mean, there are 100 poems in this thing. I picked 6. It was very hard to pick 6. I feel like I could have written a good song from almost any. So
amazing. But I think it's also something positive to come out of this. Like you say, it's uplifting. It's about love, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that for me in particular, and I think for a lot of musicians, we felt a similar sense of just like doom at the beginning. It's everything is closing down, and we have no idea how long it's going to be. And many people were facing a loss of their income, the loss of their, and I was very lucky in the sense that the orchestra was able to continue to pay us even during the lockdown for the most part. So, but a lot of my colleagues, they didn't have that, so we were all just, looking at this bleak future. And I think that, if you look back into history at some of the great masterpieces that have been composed, sometimes there's this complete opposite of, you see this wonderful love poetry that's written in the midst of a plague.
Yeah.
Or this beautiful romantic, uplifting music that's written in the midst of a war. And so I think that sometimes our artistic impulse is the opposite of what's going on around us. It gives us something to hold on to.
I totally agree, but I think it's if you think of all the beautiful things that came from this pandemic, actually, all the positive things, I think it's if you have the ability to take yourself out of a situation with creating or doing something beautiful, then it's amazing, isn't it? And I think artists have that ability to do that, because you have a very positive way, or how can I say, optimistic way. And I think you are the dreamers of the world, because I think if you think of it that way, every artist have started with a dream of becoming a pianist or a violinist or a conductor. And when you are that, then it's actually a dream that came true. So you are the dreamers of the world.
Yeah, well, and you have to, I think that, it always begins with a dream.
Yeah.
It begins with, to use the word love again, I mean, we all get started with this. Okay, some people get started because their parents make them get started, but
yeah,
but what sustains us when we're young, when we're getting started, is this love of what we're doing, this love of the music, this love of dancing or the art forms.
Yeah.
And that drives us to get better, that drives us to excel. So it can be just reduced down to love. And sustaining that love is what we have to do as mature artists. And I think of all the different ways that you can be artistic, the performing arts, the music, this is something that we have to do together, especially orchestras, and so the pandemic was the worst possible thing for a performing musician. Even in the midst of war, there were orchestras playing in the midst of the most terrible wars, but the pandemic was the one thing that this
exactly.
thing that could make that stop. So so that was very hard. I reflected last year how I had never thought, it had never occurred to me that there would be something that could prevent us from meeting together. I had never thought of that possibility before the pandemic. And we've thought about all kinds of other things like, oh, there's no money, or oh, there's
exactly.
some kind of problem, but never that. So
I do agree. This was the last thing, and I always thought, well, everybody suffered in businesses, but businesses could go online and start selling online, and restaurants could do takeaways. And not that I say they didn't have a difficult time, but for artists it was difficult because they were prevented from being with an audience, and I think that was so important as well. And I think the audience also then suddenly realized, wait a minute, this is not, yes, the online concerts had its purpose, but the live performances, that was where the energy, the backwards and forwards flow of energy went. And so I think it was I don't think anybody came out of this pandemic without thinking and realizing what goes on around us and what we appreciate.
Yeah, I think so. And as we talked about before, it kind of forced us all to come to grips with, like, if, this question of, if you can't do concerts, then what do you do?
Yeah.
And what is your purpose? If you're a conductor and your entire purpose is to be in a group of people,
yes. Yeah.
What do you do when you can't do that? So, and we all kind of came up with different answers to that question. But it really was a very, very long and difficult spiritual journey, I think, for us all. And it really required a lot of reflection and a lot of innovation and a lot of thinking in ways that we're not used to thinking. And I think in the end, though, all of these things were kind of placeholders and kind of, remind us, as great as it was that we were able to do concerts and stream them online, as great as this was, I think everyone, audience and musicians, were all just hungry for that moment when we could sit together again with a full audience and perform Beethoven's Fifth Symphony or perform whatever, and feel that energy, feel that communication.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Daniel, do you ever come to Vienna?
I have been there once. I came in 2012.
Yeah.
And I absolutely adore Vienna.
Really?
I think it's one of my favorite cities I've ever been to.
Really?
So I haven't been since 2012, but I would love to go back.
Well, if you come to Vienna, please let me know that we can grab a coffee in one of our coffee houses.
Great.
And have a nice chat. But you have to come and conduct here in Vienna and do a concert.
I would love to. And we can have a little Sachertorte as well.
Yeah. That would be great.
Yeah.
But this was so lovely to talk to you, and please let me know about this project of yours. This we have to have a conversation about that when you start. You know, when the ball is on the roll with that one, because that would be great to know. Yeah.
I would be very,
Yeah.
very happy. And actually,
Okay.
I can send you a link if you're interested.
Yes.
Just for the demo recording that I've made.
Yes,
So,
please. Yeah, I would love to hear. Yeah, good. Okay, Daniel, have a lovely afternoon.
all right. Thank you. You
And
too.
we'll speak soon. Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.